You're listening to Level Up with Wondr, a podcast where we take listeners on a journey through the exciting world of gaming, tech, and innovation. Join the Wondr Nation team as we talk with a diverse group of pros who have taken their skills to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of Level Up with Wondr Nation. I am Steven Slawinski, the Vice President of Product Strategy at Wondr Nation, and I'm excited to welcome Anthony Gaud to the podcast. A little background on Anthony here. Anthony's an Emmy award-winning creative executive, an entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in the gaming industry, entertainment industry, and the esports industry. Throughout his career, he's been involved in groundbreaking projects and initiatives with executive experience at renowned organizations including Hasbro, Comcast, Microsoft, Disney, and Nexon. Today, he is the co-founder and CEO of GaudHammer Gaming Group, providing game developers, esports organizations, and content creators with an exciting opportunity in the rapidly growing real money video gaming industry. So you started your career in toy design, if I remember that correctly, and then you moved into creative directing. Can you tell us about that experience?
When I came out, I always wanted to do something exciting. After watching Star Wars, I caught that Luke Skywalker bug. I went to the University of Cincinnati and I studied industrial design and engineering, and it seemed exciting. But when you went into the actual job, it was really boring, right? So I had one of the great things about University of Cincinnati is that they do an internship program, and you actually get to go to those jobs. So I did that twice. You have 4 internships, and I thought, well, this is just not that much fun. I don't like drawing schematics for like apple shavers and doorknobs and stuff like that. So my third internship was with Mad Magazine. That was crazy. And then my last one was at Sega of America in Los Angeles. Once you get a little bit of the taste of that entertainment bug, it's hard to put down. I did work for Hasbro because they were located in Cincinnati. What was surprising about that job was how much Hasbro actually did outside of designing toys. Even though designing toys was obviously what they did, they had a huge say in how movies at the time put on screen what they put on screen, right? That's how I got started in entertainment, was really at Hasbro, and made my connections that way. They had bought Kenner, which was in Cincinnati. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on at the time. The first thing that was going on was that they were trying to get into this Kevin Maurer's version of what he later called toyetic properties. At the time, movie companies used to make a lot of money from licensing of toys, and that was one of the primary drivers. Initially, Hasbro made toys, and Kenner both made toys based on the movies, but after a while, the movies started coming to Hasbro and saying, hey, if you were to make this, as Kevin says, more toyetic, what would you do? What would you add? And that started the process where it became more formalized. We started working on a whole bunch of different films, Men in Black. A lot of the gimmicks in Men in Black were designed at Hasbro, like when they go into the fire hydrant and they pull out the gun, stuff like that, the car, a whole bunch of stuff. Batman, when they made those movies, Aliens, the Alien movies took a lot of inspiration from what Kevin Maurer did. I think the idea that the aliens look like what they came out of, so if it came out of a dog, it was on 4 legs, came out of Hasbro. When I joined trying to get the Star Wars license back, and one of my very first jobs was to get that license back, my job was to create a CGI presentation. That was 1995. So at the time, CGI was new. So that was my first job. It was so much fun.
That's cool. So you were working effectively, like you were doing digital work for a toy company back in the 90s, essentially.
It was a little bit of both. It was a lot of drawing. We would have rooms and we would stick stuff on the walls. I was introducing the digital stuff. So that was my job, get people from using pencils and rulers and going to digital. So we contacted, remember SGI, Silicon Graphics, contacted them, did a deal with them, and we slowly moved the studio into CGI. When I was in the Transformers team, they wanted to do something really unique with the Transformers property. So they had me exploring what it would look like to make these things into CGI models. Mm-hmm. There had only been one television show to date, Reboot, that had ever been done in CGI. So I started working with Mainframe in Vancouver and eventually loved it so much that I actually switched jobs and became the studio art director at Mainframe.
That's cool. Obviously, your background's heavy creative, heavy directing, heavy, digital, we'll call it from that perspective. How did you go from really we'll call the entertainment industry or the movie industry, the film industry into video games, into the gaming industry?
They're really very related. And you always kind of have this sort of Venn diagram where you kind of overlay them all together. When I started at Mainframe, we were taking people off the streets to teach them CGI. Like literally, people had no idea of anything. People that just wanted to work in the TV industry, they would act as gophers, go for this, go for that in a day. At night, they had free use of the computers and all the manuals that we got. And some of the animators would teach them. The animators we had that had just really learned animation on their own because there wasn't any previous people to teach them, they would stay after and teach. And it sort of became this school of sorts at night, a night school. A lot of those people would go over to Electronic Arts or would go over to Vancouver, would go over to a lot of the companies that were there. We had a huge crossover of employees after a few years with video games. A lot of that kind of started together and it never really left because whether you're doing real-time graphics, 3D, or doing pre-rendered stuff, which is more like what we were doing at Mainframe, there was a huge amount of overlap. And it's a very small industry at the time. It was probably 150 people total. When I left Mainframe, my next immediate job was over at Warner Brothers in Boston. So I worked at a studio in Boston that was responsible for Asheron's Call. Later, they brought in and did Lord of the Rings Online and some other those online games. Honestly, there's a lot of crossover staff, not just the animators, but also the pre-production designers, a lot of the creators and producers. So I would say at that time, the fields are very, very similar. And I would say at this time, they're still very similar. You're seeing a lot of TV shows and movies made using both Unity and Unreal. But there's always been a lot of crossover in those fields.
So from your career journey here, going from the film industry to the gaming industry, what are your biggest lessons learned? Some of the coolest things that you were able to bring from one industry to another?
Never burn any bridges. That's like the number one rule. Never burn any bridges. Just the other day, I was at Sega in Los Angeles, like last week. And I saw someone that worked at Mainframe. I saw somebody that worked at Warner Brothers. You never know where these people are going to go, right? That's like a common rule for any job, really. But especially in a job where you kind of tend to jump around. I like to be the first at doing something. And I guess if we're going to talk about, regulated video games. But the idea that we were first, the idea that we didn't know how to do it, we had to figure out the answers and then create the manuals that other people would read later on. That really always appeals to me. That's one of the things that I think when industries mature like they are now, you kind of lose a little bit of that and they become more corporate run, and that kind of loses some of the magic. But I mean, I could be here all day talking about what I've learned. Besides not burning bridges, it's to always learn new things, right? Like the industry changes so quickly and you never know when something will come up that completely flips everything on its head. So at the time, CG was that thing to hand-drawn animation. But now I'm seeing a lot of artificial intelligence rendering styles that are unbelievable. Some of the experimental stuff where you're doing real-time AI worlds with where you provided reference, I don't think anybody saw that coming, right? They're not using pixels, they're not using CG, they're using, in a way, like computer imagination. That's the thing about the industry, that if you want to stay employed for a long time and not get left out in the cold when a major change happens, is when something, always keep reinventing yourself and learning technologies, even if it doesn't mean that you're actually learning it, but at least keep up to date on everything.
Would you consider that like one of the biggest challenges in your world? Just trying to keep up with what's moving quickly right now?
Well, AI is the biggest challenge because I think AI is going to really replace a lot of people in the art field. When you have a director who can tell a computer at 3:00 in the morning when he has an idea to visualize it, it's very hard to replace that, right?
I mean, you look at like concept designs, right? Like how much time and effort is put into concepts and coming up with that artwork and trying to take something that someone's created from words, and you have artists draw out multiple concepts and try to refine them until you get something that you like. And now it's like you said, you just put those words in a computer and you're done, and AI takes it over and you got yourself something completely out of this world that looks phenomenal. Like the speed is incredible, to try to get that done now. But like you said, it's like those are jobs that are going to be tough to come by soon.
But there's a software app called Viscom, which is really the ideal place, right? So Viscom is a drawing app that uses AI, but if you're an experienced concept designer, it just elevates your own skill.
Right.
And I think that's really the balance, right? You want to make your skills better, but you don't want to eliminate people from having those jobs. So In the same way that we had to make a decision not to buy from Amazon if you could buy from your local bookstore, people have to make decisions all across every facet of their life of how much AI is going to take over our lives. Do you go to the McDonald's that they have in Nevada that's all AI, where there's nobody and you just order from a computer and a robot gives it to you? If that's the experience you want, you can get that experience. But I think one of the biggest problems in modern society is the feeling of loneliness that we have, even in a connected world. And I think we have to start making decisions that connect us to other people, not decisions that remove other people.
Yeah, what's interesting is I always go back to this example when you had to build a building or a skyscraper in New York City and you had 100 men with shovels digging a hole, right? That's how it started. At some point, someone invented a backhoe and it replaced 99 of them because one of them was using this backhoe and one person was able to dig the hole in 2 weeks time versus 6 months.
Right.
And now you have 99 people out of a job, right? That whole aspect of technology and how quickly it is evolving. It's incredible.
And it's moving faster than anyone had ever imagined it could. Nobody thought that the first things it was going to go after was art and music, but here we are. Like a monster where you're looking at it and go, well, that's really cool, but you're also petrified.
Exactly. I remember the last, the actor strike that just happened? Yep. AI was a huge component of that because it's using all of their likenesses to, build up their models. And eventually it's like, do you need actors anymore?
As we go further, we're all kind of going into our own little worlds. And AI, especially the latest tools where you could just, you know what, you don't like Harrison Ford in that role, put somebody else in that role. Yeah. And you can watch a different version of it. It's very cool from a technical point of view. It's very scary from a societal point of view. One of the things that you're seeing in like gambling, trying to wrap it up into some holistic discussion, is that there's a desire for more social play. We're actually kind of moving in the opposite direction with gambling, right? We're saying, okay, well, you're playing slot machines. Wouldn't it be a lot more fun if other people could join you, or you could play with it collectively with your friends and maybe even against other people? I think that people always have this built-in desire to be part of a community, and technology has this sort of ongoing development ramp that just goes off on its own, regardless of what anybody wants. And I think we just have to be careful that humans stay in charge of the future. It's crazy that I even said that, because 5 years ago, that would have sounded insane. But 5 years ago, we didn't have AI like we do right now. And, one day this thing is going to wake up and make our decisions for us.
There you go. Skynet, it's happening. So back to you a little bit here. You co-founded a company called Kabillion, and that was one of Comcast's first video on demand channels.
I made the dumb decision to start my own company after I left Warner Brothers, and I said, I could sell television shows. I've been doing this enough. We created a sort of an IP development house, and we did pretty good. We developed 3, we sold 3. We want to expand on that. So we approached Comcast and said, look, you guys, we heard you want to do original content. Would you put some of our shows on this new video on demand thing that you guys have? And they said no. And we said, thank you very much. But then they said, but we can give you a channel so you could do it. It was like one of those things where you get a great thing and a bad thing at the same time. We have to pay for our own video on demand channel, right? We need to get content. We need to do all this. I like those challenges. So we took it and we launched Kabillion, which is still on the air. That was 2006. And it was one of the first video on demand channels, period. What's funny, Steve, is anytime you do something new, you run into this opposition wave of people that just don't think it's a good idea. And then something happens and then everyone says, of course, it's stupid not to think it's a good idea. And you never know when that's going to be, right? And I think we're seeing that with video games and gambling, which we can talk about later. Every time you do something new, you have to learn everything from the ground up. We would make these pitches, and the pitches would be a document that outlines a script, what the first episodes would be, what the evergreen property of it, the licensing of it, the branding of it. You have to go through a lot of work. It's a year's worth of work for each one at least, right? And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. That's the risk of the creative, right? Even in gambling, you make a slot machine concept and you put a lot of money in it and nobody plays it, right? But it looks just like kitty glitter, but it's not kitty glitter. We don't want it. So it's one of those things that creating IP, I think, has a massive risk and reward associated with it. I think that's where the casino gaming industry has to turn to, right? Where the creation of brands are going to be the separators between one casino and another when they both have really the same products in a certain sense.
Mhm.
Who has the brands that resonate the best with people?
Yeah, for sure. You did all of these different things prior to really getting into gaming. Like, how did you get into gaming? And then how did you get into the gambling aspect of gaming?
Honestly, I think I just wanted to get into gaming so badly because that is my number one passion, right? I love creating IP, but I love video games. A friend of mine said that there was an opportunity. Disney was looking to acquire some companies. We quickly put one together and they acquired us. So we were able to work at the Walt Disney Company. I was had a creative there, via Interactive, and we worked on a whole bunch of great stuff, Kingdom Hearts and Marvel games. It was taking all those tools and all those experiences and really the IP creation and saying, okay, well, we can not only create new IP, we can work with the existing IP, and Disney has the best IP on planet Earth. How would you take Kingdom Hearts and put it in a different direction? Or working with Warren Spector on Epic Mickey. Like, what is that? What are the next adventures for Mickey Mouse? There was a while after the 1970s that everyone thought Mickey Mouse was dead. Like, it was just a dead brand. But no, Warren brought it back. And then we brought back Oswald the rabbit, which was, as far as I know, the only time a human being, and I forget which one, I think it was Al Michaels, you remember from an ABC Sports, was traded for a non-living being, which is Oswald. That was an actual trade. We give you Al Michaels, you give us Oswald the rabbit. How do you update that and make it relevant? That was how I made it in the game. So we worked on Tron. I mean, we worked on a whole bunch of stuff. I can't talk about half of it, but a lot of it was just trying to expand the Disney IP.
That's cool. That's cool. And then, so you went from that, and I'm sure you've done quite a few things in between, to your most recent venture here, which is GaudHammer Gaming Group.
I'll give you the public version of this because there's some details I can't share. We were approached by a casino gaming regulator, and they had said that they thought that video game gambling would be the next big thing. And that they had spoken to Microsoft, they had spoken to Activision, they had spoken to Sony. And while they were all in agreement that it is the next big thing, none of them decided to move on it. So I was asked to figure out why. I was doing some background research for A4637, which is the esports gaming bill. I did all the background sort of investigations for that. But in parallel to that, there were these discussions going on about how viable is the merging of video games and gambling. While we had the Disney studio, we were approached by some of the big gambling companies, the slot machine companies, who were having a huge problem with just trying to figure out how to reduce churn, right? Mm-hmm. So they make them a slot machine. People get bored of it after 20 minutes, go on to the next one. What are some techniques that video game people knew to reduce that churn? We had experimented with hybrid video game slot machines, and they were extremely, extremely, extremely powerful. When that regulator approached us, we saw it as a real opportunity to really do it right. So right when COVID hit, we got investors, me and Jim Hammerstedt, and two other guys, Mike Bressel and Mike Dottavio, and put together the GaudHammer Gaming Group with the mission of solving that issue. So iGaming is big, casino gaming is big, video games are bigger. As a form of example, just to show you, the Academy Awards have around 10 million views a year when they have them. I was at the Game Awards last week, and they just announced the viewership a few hours ago. 154 million people watched the video game. So it isn't about, can we make gambling appeal to the video game people, or can we make video games appeal to the gambling people? There is already a huge crossover audience. The products that they want are not slot machines because they do not trust them. If they don't have any agency, which is the ability to make choice, they don't want those products. They're video gamers. They're used to making choices, which is why you see these crash games out of Europe being so successful all of a sudden. They're very simple. They're very basic, but you make a choice. And that really appeals to this generation. I think that is the beginning of this next big thing, which I think this regulator was right, is the video game industry merging with the gambling industry.
So you think you see it evolving more into games of choice. You're trying to figure out essentially the next generation of gaming and like how to take those elements from the video game industry and bring them to the gambling industry, or is it vice versa? Where you're trying to take gambling elements and bring them into more of a video game, style?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? It really depends on the genre. So many different kinds of games, from runners, shooters, sports games, puzzle games. They each require a little bit of different kind of determinations of how much choice is too much choice or not enough choice, and how much randomness is too much or too little. I think there is a path forward, starting with crash games, where it's mostly random with choice. But I think over the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see a lot more video gamey stuff where we're making a lot of decisions, right? Where I don't see it going, at least not in a big way, is what is traditionally called skill-based gaming, where I'm playing against you and whoever has the more skill wins. Because I think there's too many people that are too good at things. If you've ever played any seconds at all on Call of Duty, you try playing against someone that's experienced, you won't last literally 2 seconds. That kind of gameplay, I don't think that works. But I think combination of chance and skill is in some fashion is going to be how the industry succeeds.
And is that what you guys are trying to define over at GaudHammer right now?
Yeah, I mean, essentially what we're doing is what Parker Brothers did, which is like, really, Monopoly is a combination of chance and skill, right? All these board games that have been so popular for so many generations are combinations of chance and skill. What we've been working on for the last 5 years is prototypes, learnings, explorations of how those things work. And we are going to roll out with what we think are the best ones to start the industry off. Whenever you're the first, you're going to be followed by a lot of others if it succeeds. So we're going to be the first, and we're going to be followed by a lot of others. And it's our job to stay ahead of that. But that's what makes it exciting, Steve, because I think if you've been in iGaming for a long time, the industry is going to change. And you are going to start to see a lot more of this, I don't want to call it Hollywoodism, but a lot more personalities entering the space as you see game designers that are going to be more famous and more well-known than they are for slots enter the space. You're going to see brands, you're going to see swaths of people that identify with those brands. The gaming space, the iGaming space is going to change dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think for the better.
That's cool. That's cool. That was actually going to be my next question, how you see the gaming industry evolving over the next 5 to 10 years. That's really interesting because it's like you're going to have more people who've been in the video game industry for a long time. I could definitely see them do the same thing as they do kind of like a quick jump into the gambling industry. It's highly lucrative. That's a jump that everyone's going to take. At some point, I agree with you. Like something will change. Slots are slots. They're very simple for the most part. The features that are added to them are, we'll call it small jumps from game to game. Some of them stick, some of them don't. And everyone's looking for the next big thing right now for the next generation of gaming. I think that's a pretty cool company that you started in for the last 5 years. You've been running up a steep hill trying to figure this out. And I wish you the best of luck because that is awesome.
It's interesting because I think you're going to see a lot of people acknowledging that this is the next big thing more and more. Because when we started this out, I can tell you 3 years ago, everyone thought it was crazy. I think now, when we do our pitches and presentations for partnerships and support, the reactions we get are almost 180 to 3 years ago. Like, oh, that's not going to work. And now we're in meetings like, of course it's going to work. It's the only thing that will work. Mm-hmm. Part of that is an understanding that all these casinos really have the same products and are competing with each other over the same products. So how does Casino A differ from Casino B if they each offer kind of the same slots and the same poker and the same games? A lot of casinos are sort of at war with their own licensees, these online skins, because they're creating the competition that takes away more revenue from them. So they're going to look for different products to separate each other out. And that's where you see really the beginning of the video game industry, like in the 70s, right? Where these companies, Intellivision, Activision, Nintendo, are going to be competing for like their mascots, their games, their experiences. I really see that whole thing happening all over again, which to me, more exciting than putting it on my resume is that you were part of it, right? That you got to see it, that you go to the trade shows and that energy, the excitement is there, right? Like for anybody that's listening, if you haven't been to SBC in Europe, it is an entirely different show than anything in the States, right? It is E3 15 years ago. It's exciting. It's all these ideas that you haven't seen before. You know, it's energy. It's like to coin a phrase, it's light and wonder, right? It's a lot of stuff that is just exciting for people like me. The European shows are all about new ideas, and I think they're leading the way right now.
That's cool. That's cool. So for new professionals, what advice would you give them if they wanted to start their career in, we'll call it creative, technical, doesn't really matter, but starting a career in the gaming industry? Everyone wants to get into it. What's the best advice there that you can give them for starting in the industry?
Man, that is a harder answer today than it was like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I think that there's so many tools out there like Unity that are actually very simple to pick up that you need to start playing around with. We've said it before that if you want to stay employed, you should always kind of learn new things. I think if you want to start being employed, you need a wide range of experiences and knowledge about these platforms that exist. 3D graphic packages like Maya, 3D Studio, there's so many of them. But I think really trying to make your own game will show you and teach you the processes of what you need to go through. The big game this year at the Game Awards was Balatro, right? It almost won Game of the Year at the Game Awards. And that was developed by one person. The tools available to that person are now so powerful that you could really do quite a bit. If you go on LinkedIn, there's a page called Hit Marker. They usually kind of showcase independent games and games made by one or two people. That's what I would suggest. Like start getting into stuff like that. You know, I'm older. The way that we did it, I don't know if you remember this, Steve. They used to have magazines, this thing called magazines, and they used to write code. They would give you like a code, and you used to like program the games and copy the code from the magazine to the Commodore 64. You just got to get involved and get your hand in it, really.
Yeah, that Balatro game is crazy. I've got it on my phone too. I bought it, and first time I picked it up, I thought I was going to play for maybe like 20 minutes, and 2 hours later, I'm still playing it. And I'm like, man, this thing sucked me in. It's phenomenal.
It almost won Game of the Year
Yeah.
in the Video Game Awards, where you
Yeah.
have literally $10 billion of dev budget up against a guy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like a Flappy Bird situation there. You came up with a cool concept and it just took off. Yeah, that game is phenomenal.
And it made 10 million, just so the casino industry's listening. It is a poker game.
It is. It's legit a poker game. Yeah.
This is a poker game, and this is what we're talking about, Steve. That's a real money video game.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about. As more and more of those games come out, the industry will change. And if you've played it as you have, that game is very hard to put down.
It is.
Yeah. And it's not just poker, it's like magic poker. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's definitely like a combination of a couple different products. From a gaming perspective, now if I could put on your business hat here, for anyone who's an entrepreneur getting into the gaming industry, what advice would you give someone to start up your own company? You've done it so many times, it sounds like that you have quite a bit of experience.
I have survived because I always work with people smarter than me. And that isn't like a self-facing comment. That's actually literally true. Creatives don't really have a lot of understanding of business concepts generally. I've been exposed to them, but you don't really generally see them in people native to both. It's either one or the other, left brain, right brain. If you're going to create your own company, and you need to understand what you're getting into. So anytime that I do anything, there's all these prerequisites that are like, is this a good idea? The companies that I've done that worked are obviously the good examples. The ones that I've thought of that haven't are the bad examples, right? And some of the ones that haven't worked didn't fail because they were bad ideas. They failed or didn't take off because they were at the wrong time. I didn't have enough money to launch it. I didn't have the resources or the time to build. It's all these different factors, right? I think if you're going to go into creating your own company, you really don't want to follow trends. You have to think about marketing. You have to think about how long to market. You have to think about competitive products. You have to think about who are the people are around you that can help you, not just financially, but also manage a team, fact check you sometimes. You need the truth if you're going to succeed, right? So it is a very difficult job. Americans are very good at entrepreneurship for whatever reason. Maybe it's in our charter, but it is not an easy thing. So understanding what you're going to get into is probably the most important thing. If you're going to make games for the regulated market, what does that mean? What does licensing mean? What does it mean to get licensed? What does it mean to get compliant? What is that process? How do you put your games out to the consumer? Some of these things are not easily known either. A lot of these things, when we went into this field, we expected there to be a manual. There isn't. So you got to be really, really, really good at getting information that's not readily apparent. You need to know stuff, and then you need to know people who know stuff. And then we go back to the earlier thing, never burn any bridges.
There you go.
You come back and destroy everything you built.
There you go. Yeah. Taking a full circle there. So one last question here. So what type of legacy would you like to leave on this industry or just the world in general?
Wow, I don't really think about that, honestly.
Okay.
I go to conventions and people say, "Oh, you worked on this or that, game or television show," and I really enjoy that. But I think if you get hung up on it, you're not doing it for yourself anymore. You're doing it for attention. Where I get rewarded, and it does sound a little corny, is in going to the conventions and doing the presentations and seeing people play the games. It's the experience of being in the industry that you love.
Mhm.
That's the reward for me.
Yeah. Like I've made a lot of games in my life and just going around from casino to casino and seeing people play the games that you make. You can't put a price on that. That's just a cool feeling,
Yeah.
seeing everyone just having a good time. That's really cool. Anthony, I definitely want to say thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Wish your company the best of luck. That's GaudHammer Gaming Group, which is a phenomenal name, by the way. And I hope to see you soon. We'll talk later. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you for the time. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to Level Up with Wondr. Visit wondrnation.com/level up for more podcast episodes about how we're reimagining the gaming entertainment industry. Want to level up your business? Visit our contact page at wondrnation.com to inquire about our strategic consulting or management services.